A 5-ton elephant, a railroad crane, and 2,500 spectators, including children, who came to watch her die. On September 13th, 1916, in the small town of Erwin, Tennessee, they hanged an elephant. To understand how a town could do something like this, we need to go back to the beginning. Her name was Mary. She was an Asian elephant, born around 1894, probably somewhere in Southeast Asia, before being captured and shipped across the ocean to a country she would never leave. For over 20 years, Mary was the star attraction of the Sparks world famous shows, a traveling circus that crisscrossed the American South. She was intelligent. She could play musical instruments, catch baseballs, and follow dozens of commands. Audiences loved her. She weighed 5 tons and stood over 8 feet tall, and by all accounts she had performed without serious incident for 2 decades. But in September 1916, everything changed, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why what happened to Mary still haunts people over a century later. The Sparks world famous shows was run by Charlie Sparks, a seasoned circus operator who toured through small Appalachian towns where entertainment was scarce and a traveling circus was the event of the year. Mary was his biggest draw, literally. She was marketed as the largest living land animal in captivity, and towns would pay top dollar to host a show featuring her. In early September 1916, the circus rolled into Kingsport, Tennessee. They needed handlers, and they needed them fast. That's when a man named Walter Eldridge showed up. Eldridge, known to most as Red, was a drifter. He had no experience with elephants, no training, no understanding of how to read the body language of a 5-ton animal with the intelligence of a small child. But the circus was short-staffed, so they gave him a bullhook and told him to ride Mary down to a nearby pond so she could drink. It was his second day on the job. And here's a detail that becomes important later. Some witnesses said they saw Red jab Mary behind the ear with his hook before anything went wrong. Imagine being in that crowd. It's a warm September afternoon. You've brought your children to see the elephants. And then, chaos. According to eyewitness accounts, Mary was walking toward the pond when she spotted a watermelon rind on the ground and reached for it. Red Eldridge, either startled or impatient, jabbed her behind the ear with his bullhook, a sharp metal tool used to discipline elephants through pain. Mary reacted instantly. She seized Eldridge with her trunk, hurled him against a wooden drink stand, and then walked over and stepped on his head. He died almost immediately. The crowd erupted, people screamed, children were pulled away, and within minutes a local blacksmith pulled a pistol and fired 5 rounds into Mary. The bullets barely penetrated her thick hide. She stood there, bleeding slightly, confused, surrounded by a mob of people who moments ago had been cheering for her. But here's the part that should unsettle you. What happened next wasn't about justice. It wasn't even about safety. It was about something far uglier. The nearby town of Erwin heard the news and immediately issued an ultimatum. If the circus didn't destroy Mary, she would never perform in their town again. And other towns followed. Charlie Sparks had a problem. Without Mary, his circus was nothing. But without the cooperation of local towns, his circus was also nothing. The pressure was overwhelming. Newspapers ran headlines calling her Murderous Mary. Local leaders demanded blood. Some suggested electrocution, like what had been done to an elephant named Topsy at Coney Island 13 years earlier. Others wanted her shot with a cannon, but Sparks settled on something else entirely. Erwin, Tennessee had a Clinchfield railroad yard with an industrial derrick crane, the kind used to lift locomotives. It could handle the weight. They would hang her. Think about that for a moment. A group of grown men sat in a room and decided the most appropriate response to an animal acting on instinct was a public hanging, a form of execution reserved for human criminals. and they promoted it. Flyers went out. Word spread through the mountains. On September 13th, over 2,500 people gathered in the Erwin rail yard. Vendors sold food. Families brought children. It was treated like a carnival. The very circus Mary had spent her life performing in had become the audience, and she was the final act. Now here's what most people don't know about this story. The official narrative, the one newspapers printed and the one most history books repeat, is that Mary was a dangerous, murderous animal who had to be put down for public safety. But the evidence tells a very different story. Red Eldridge had been on the job for less than 48 hours. He had zero training. Multiple witnesses confirmed he struck Mary behind the ear, one of the most sensitive spots on an elephant's body, with a sharp metal hook. Elephants in early 20th century circuses were routinely beaten, starved, and chained for hours in cramped railroad cars. Mary had endured this for over 20 years. She wasn't a murderer. She was a captive animal who reacted to pain the only way a 5-ton creature can. And the town that killed her, they didn't do it out of fear. They did it because the spectacle of hanging an elephant would put Erwin, Tennessee, on the map. And it did. The photographs of Mary hanging from that crane circulated in newspapers across the country. The town got exactly what it wanted. They wrapped a chain around Mary's neck and attached it to the derrick crane. 2,500 people watched as the chain pulled tight and Mary was lifted off the ground. And then the chain snapped. 5 tons of elephant crashed to the earth. Her hips shattered on impact. The crowd screamed, not in horror for Mary, but because they thought she was going to charge. She didn't. She couldn't. Mary lay on the ground, broken, while the workers found a heavier chain. They wrapped it around her neck again, and this time they hoisted her up and held her there until she was dead. She was buried beside the railroad tracks in a grave that was never marked. No monument, no acknowledgement, just a hole in the ground for an animal who had entertained thousands for 20 years and whose only crime was reacting to pain. The town cheered, the circus moved on, and Mary, the elephant who could play instruments, catch baseballs, and follow dozens of commands, was erased. Mary didn't die because she was dangerous. She died because she was profitable, alive and dead. And the people who killed her went home that night, tucked their children into bed, and never questioned what they'd done. That might be the darkest part of all, not that it happened, but that nobody thought it was wrong. The dark ledger has many pages, and some of the worst ones aren't about what monsters do. They're about what ordinary people allow. The next page is already waiting.